The Marine's final question cut through the tribunal like a blade of ice. Do you truly wish to find out? The silence that followed was not emptiness, but a living thing, heavy, suffocating, pressing down on every delegate in the chamber. The Zorlak general who had once mocked now sat frozen, his armored fists clenched, his mouth a thin line of unease. The insectoid queen's wings quivered, their golden shimmer dulled with fear. Even the stone-skinned warlords, proud and unyielding, shifted uncomfortably, their arrogance fractured under the weight of the human's words. For in that single sentence, the galaxy had glimpsed a truth too sharp to deny. The Marine let the silence linger, then straightened, his voice no longer a whisper but a steady, iron weight. You laugh at us because we are small, because our lives are brief, because we are fragile. But you forget the truth of fragility. A fragile species does not survive by accident. It survives because it learns to endure, to adapt, to fight with a will you cannot measure. The hologram flickered once more, not with destruction but with images of hope. Firefighters pulling survivors from rubble, soldiers shielding civilians with their bodies, courts where the guilty were tried for their crimes. The chamber stared, silent still. But this silence was different. No longer disbelief. No longer mockery but recognition. The Marine's tone hardened. We invented the concept of war crimes because we had to. Because without laws, without restraints, we would have become monsters beyond even your darkest nightmares. Our scars are not signs of weakness. They are reminders of what happens when we let go. The delegates shifted uneasily, whispers rippling once again. Some spoke of banning humanity, others of controlling it. But among the smaller worlds, those long crushed under the boots of greater empires, voices rose in quiet awe, for they saw not only a threat, but a mirror of their own struggles. If humanity could endure its own darkness and rise again, perhaps they too could endure. The High Chancellor leaned forward, its glowing eyes dimmed but steady. You claim to bring warnings, not threats, it said. Then tell us, human, what do you wish of this tribunal? The Marine met its gaze without fear. We do not ask for fear. We ask for recognition. We ask for a place among you. Not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as equals. Understand this, we carry both hope and horror within us. If you treat us as children, you will awaken the horror. But if you treat us as equals, you will find no ally more loyal, no defender more fierce. The chamber was silent one last time, but this silence was no longer doubt. It was respect edged with fear, bound with awe. The Marine's final words echoed like thunder. Remember this, war crimes are not warnings. They are promises of what humanity becomes if the chains are broken. Do not break them. The High Chancellor's body glowed brighter, its veins of light pulsing like a storm contained within fragile glass. It had ruled over centuries of order, presided over countless debates of war and peace, yet never had its voice trembled as it did now. Human, it said, slow and cautious. If this is restraint, then what are you without it? The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted over one another, voices clashing like blades. The insectoid queen hissed in panic, her golden wings thrashing against the marble railings. The stone-skinned warlords of the core barked demands for humanity's isolation. The energy beings flickered in frantic bursts of color that stained the air with dread. Fear had taken root and it spread like wildfire. One delegate, a serpent-bodied minister with scales like obsidian glass, slammed his tail against the floor, the impact ringing like thunder. This species must not be allowed to walk among us. They have admitted to horrors that eclipse even the darkest empires of our past. If they are capable of such destruction upon themselves, then what might they unleash upon us? Others cried out in agreement. Quarantine them. Exile them. Erase their weapons before they erase us. Yet there were voices that faltered, whispers from the smaller worlds, the weaker races who had long lived under the yoke of the greater empires. They looked at the human Marine and saw not a monster, but a possibility. A species that had endured its own apocalypse and yet survived. Perhaps such resilience was not only dangerous, but necessary. The Marine stood in the center of the storm. Unmoving, his eyes scanned the chamber, his silence louder than their chaos. Finally, when the noise threatened to consume the tribunal itself, he spoke. You mistake our scars for weapons. They are warnings. We do not bring these horrors as threats. We bring them so you may understand who we are. The room stilled again, every gaze locked on him. His words were not shouted, but carried a weight that pressed into the hearts of even the proudest conquerors. We do not seek conquest, we do not seek your worlds, but do not mistake mercy for weakness. We chained the monsters we created, and we pray we never unchain them again. But if pushed, if forced, we will unleash what we fear most in ourselves, and if that day comes, nothing in this tribunal will survive us. The silence that followed was absolute, the air heavy with terror, the chamber alive with a truth too sharp to ignore. Even the Zorlak general, who had mocked the Marine before, now sat frozen, his jagged teeth clenched in unease. The general's challenge cracked the silence like a thunderclap. His jagged voice filled the tribunal, raw with fury, but beneath it quivered something far older than anger. Fear. He rose to his full height, armored in bone and arrogance, eyes like burning coals fixed on the lone Marine. You speak of restraint as if it were iron chains. But what happens, human, when those chains break? When your kind decides to unleash the darkness you guard so closely? The delegates murmured, the sound a storm of dread. Every eye turned toward the Marine, for in that question lingered the nightmare that now haunted them all. If this fragile species had survived the fire of its own crimes, what horrors would be unleashed if restraint failed? The Marine did not flinch. Instead, he stepped forward, into the center of the chamber, his boots echoing on polished stone. The hologram shimmered again, and with it came new images, not the ancient scars of Earth, but something far more terrifying: weapons. Rows upon rows of sleek metallic cylinders buried beneath mountains, arsenals hidden deep within the earth, waiting, silent, patient. Gasps rippled across the tribunal. The alien delegates leaned forward, voices trembling. These are weapons? The Marine's gaze swept across them, cold and steady. These are nightmares we built to end all nightmares. Weapons that do not merely burn cities but erase them. Weapons strong enough to turn your sons into shadows? The chamber shook with cries. The insectoid queen recoiled, her wings folding around her body like a shield. The energy beings flickered in frantic bursts of crimson. Even the stone-skinned warlords whispered among themselves, their arrogance fractured. They had believed no species could carry fire greater than their own. But here stood a human, showing them the truth, that Earth's monsters still slumbered beneath its soil. The general snarled, though his voice wavered. You keep such horrors hidden. Why? The Marine's voice dropped to a whisper that carried across the chamber. Because we fear ourselves, because we know what happens when restraint fails, and because if the day ever comes when we must choose between our survival and our fear, the galaxy will burn. A suffocating stillness fell over the tribunal. No laughter, no whispers, only the thundering echo of those words. The Marine's eyes swept across the crowd, unblinking, unwavering. We pray never to unchain what we buried, but do not mistake prayer for weakness. Test us, push us, and you will learn what it means when humanity stops holding back. The High Chancellor's glow dimmed, as though even its ancient body could not endure the weight of those words. The tribunal had heard boasts before, had heard empires roar of conquest. But never had they heard a threat spoken not as promise, but as inevitability. The chamber had never been so still for centuries. The Galactic Tribunal had echoed with voices, boasts, threats, treaties carved in words sharper than blades. But now, silence reigned, a silence so heavy it pressed against the skin of every being present. The High Chancellor's glowing eyes fixed on the Marine. Its voice was softer now, almost hesitant. How many? The Marine let the question linger, refusing to answer at once. Instead, he raised his hand again and the hologram shifted. Images appeared in slow succession. A city bathed in fire as bombs rained from a darkened sky. Men and women coughing, their lungs shredded by invisible gas. Children walking barefoot through ruins where no birds sang. The gallery of Earth's horrors unfolded, each one branded with the same chilling truth. Too many, the Marine said at last. His voice did not rise, it did not tremble. It was the steady voice of someone who had seen enough to understand that numbers could not capture suffering. Too many crimes, too many scars, each one etched into the bones of our history. Whispers trembled across the tiers. Alien diplomats shifted in their seats, clawed fingers tightening around railings, antennae twitching with unease. Even the Zorlak general, armored in arrogance, sat straighter now. His smirk faded because the Marine's words carried weight that no display of technology could equal. We are not proud of these crimes, the Marine continued, but they are ours. They are the shadows of our species. We did not inherit them from monsters or gods. We made them, and when the fires finally dimmed, We wrote laws not to save ourselves from you, but to save ourselves from ourselves. The council listened, transfixed. The insectoid queen of the Vaith shifted her wings uneasily, her voice clicking like glass. You admit weakness, yet you speak with pride. The Marine turned his gaze toward her, eyes like cold steel. No, I do not speak with pride. I speak with warning. A pulse of dread rippled through the chamber. Aliens who had believed themselves masters of cruelty were realizing they had never walked so close to the abyss. For humanity was not merely a species of warriors, it was a species that had looked into its own darkness and chosen to chain it. The Marine stepped forward, and the hologram flickered again. This time, the screen showed a single soldier carrying a wounded child from a burning village. Beside it, soldiers standing trial, condemned for their crimes. We judge ourselves, the Marine said. We carry laws of restraint into battle because without them, we would become the very thing you fear most. The chamber was breathless. The weight of history pressed down like a storm cloud ready to break. Even those who had mocked now leaned forward, unwilling yet unable to turn away. The tribunal chamber dimmed as the holograms shifted again. The light bled away from the polished walls, replaced by the red glow of fire and the smoke of human history. The delegates leaned forward, their breath caught in throats that no longer laughed. For now the Marine was showing them not tales, but nightmares. The first image flared into existence. A trench-scarred battlefield, mud swallowing men whole as shells screamed overhead, the air thick with poison gas, soldiers clawing at their throats as the invisible death ate them from within. Alien eyes blinked in horror, uncomprehending, for never had they conceived of war so cruel that it consumed its own sons like cattle in the slaughterhouse. The second image came, cities carpet-bombed into ash, streets filled with women clutching lifeless children, towers collapsing into oceans of flame, the crackle of fire, the scream of sirens, the silence of despair. The chamber filled with whispers of disbelief. The insectoid queen hissed in terror. You destroyed yourselves. For victory? The Marine's voice did not rise. It did not falter. Yes, and worse still, we destroyed not for victory, but for punishment, for hate, for vengeance, for nothing more than proving we could. The third image, an endless field of bones, skulls stacked like monuments beneath a blackened sky. Even the stone-skinned delegates recoiled, their hardened faces twisted by fear, for the sight was too alien, too monstrous. Yet the Marine's tone remained steady, each word a hammer against the fragile silence. We built camps where suffering was measured in numbers, where cruelty was perfected into industry. We turned slaughter into routine. Gasps echoed, wings shivered, tendrils curled inward. The beings who had crushed planets, who had enslaved moons, trembled, because cruelty without purpose was a concept beyond even their long histories. The final image flared, the mushroom cloud rising into a burning sky. A sun born from mankind's own hands, its light swallowed the tribunal, casting shadows across faces that had once mocked. The silence broke into a chorus of horrified cries. Delegates rose from their seats, voices overlapping in disbelief. That cannot be real. No species would unleash such fire upon its own world. But the Marine's face remained carved in stone. It is real, he said, and it happened not once but twice. And then we built weapons thousands of times stronger. And then we buried them, chained them. Because we finally feared ourselves. The chamber quaked with fear. Aliens who had believed themselves conquerors now saw their arrogance crumble. For the humans before them were not fragile. They were survivors of their own apocalypse. A species that had looked into annihilation and still endured. The Marine's eyes locked on the council, his voice low, each word dripping with warning. These are war crimes, these are our scars. And if we could do this to ourselves, what do you think we could do to you? The Galactic Tribunal had gathered, a place where empires older than stars themselves came to speak. The chamber was vast, carved from light and stone, so large it could hold entire fleets inside. Delegates of 100 alien species filled the tiers. Scaled warlords with blades for teeth, insectoid queens who shimmered with golden wings, beings of pure energy flickering in colors no human eye had ever seen. And for the first time in history, humanity had been invited. At the center of the hall. Under blinding white light stood the human delegation, not kings, not presidents, not scholars, but a single soldier, a Marine. His uniform was simple compared to the jeweled robes of alien royalty, but the medals on his chest carried a weight no decoration could truly explain. He stood tall, back straight, eyes sharp, while thousands of alien eyes studied him, measuring his worth. To them, humanity was nothing more than a young species from a forgotten blue planet. Fragile bodies, short lifespans, primitive weapons. They expected little. The chamber stirred with laughter, a chorus of hisses, growls, and echoing tones from alien throats, some pointed with clawed hands. Others whispered in voices that rattled like machinery. "Look at the soft one alien sneered, its scaled face twisting into a cruel smile. Another, a massive creature of stone and fire, rumbled with mocking delight. "This is humanity's champion? This fragile thing?" The laughter swelled until it drowned the chamber, shaking the very walls of the tribunal. Still, the Marine did not move. He did not blink, he did not lower his eyes. He let the storm of alien laughter pass over him like wind across a battlefield, because he had heard such laughter before on Earth, from enemies who had underestimated humanity, and he knew how those battles had ended. The High Chancellor of the Tribunal, a towering figure of translucent skin and glowing veins, raised one long hand, silencing the crowd. Its voice echoed like thunder. "Human of Earth, you have been summoned here to prove your species worthy of recognition among the stars. Tell us, what can you offer the galaxy that it does not already possess?" Before the Marine could speak, a general from the Zorlak Dominion rose. His body covered in jagged armor of bone, he sneered down at the human, his voice carrying across the chamber. "What knowledge could your kind possibly share about war? We have waged it for millennia before your species crawled from its oceans. What could you, fragile and weak, possibly teach us?" The hall erupted again with cruel laughter, shaking with the sound of 1,000 alien voices united in mockery. But this time the Marine moved. He stepped forward into the light, his shadow stretching long across the polished floor. His voice, calm and steady, cut through the noise like a blade. "You ask what we can teach you about war." The laughter died down, curiosity replacing cruelty. The Marine's eyes were cold, his words sharpened by memory and pain. "I can teach you about war crimes." The word hung in the air like a weapon unsheathed. War crimes. The Marine's voice had been steady, almost too calm, and that calmness unsettled the council more than any roar of defiance could have. A ripple of confusion spread across the chamber. Delegates leaned toward each other, whispering in languages that hissed, clicked, and thrummed like broken machinery. The phrase was alien to them, yet its weight was undeniable. For the first time since the human had entered the tribunal, the laughter faltered. The alien general of the Zorlak Dominion bared jagged teeth, his armored chest heaving with scorn. "Explain yourself, human. Your species cannot even endure the vacuum of space without machines. And yet you dare to claim knowledge of war beyond ours?" The council murmured in agreement. Voices like rustling storms, but curiosity lingered in their tones now. Mockery had begun to fade, replaced by something far more dangerous. Interest. The Marine took another step forward, the tribunal lights glinting off the metals across his chest. He raised a hand and the holographic systems obeyed. Images flared to life above him. Not alien worlds, not cosmic battles, but Earth, its skies dark with smoke, its oceans burning with oil, its cities shattered into ash. The chamber fell quiet. The only sound, the hum of the projection. "War crimes," the Marine said again, his eyes scanning the alien crowd. "Acts so terrible, so monstrous, that even in the chaos of war we were forced to define them, to name them, to forbid them. Not because our enemies demanded it, but because we feared what we might become if we did not." Gasps echoed from the tiers, low and sharp. Aliens who had slaughtered rivals for centuries, who had crushed planets under their banners, found themselves unsettled, because never once had they considered that war itself could have limits. Never once had they imagined that violence could carry rules carved in fire and blood. The Marine's voice grew colder. "Your kind fights for conquest, for survival, for dominance, but humanity has fought wars where cruelty itself became the weapon, where civilians were burned alive, where cities were reduced to rubble not for victory, but for punishment. We invented the concept of the forbidden, because we saw in ourselves the abyss of annihilation," the alien general scoffed. But his tone carried unease, lies, theatrics. "Nothing more," he snarled. But others did not agree across the chamber. Whispers spread like wildfire. If what the human said was true, then perhaps this fragile species carried a darkness greater than their strength suggested. The Marine extended his hand toward the hologram, and a single image filled the air, a mushroom cloud blooming across a broken sky. Alien gasps filled the tribunal, voices trembling with horror. The Marine's voice dropped to a whisper carrying more weight than any shout. "This is a war crime." The chamber was silent, every eye fixed on the human who had dared to speak. And in that silence, the galaxy shifted,